Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome to the participants. We're just waiting to get started. Welcome to the participants who just joined. We are waiting a couple more minutes so that we can just get more people into the room. To the participants who are just joining this room, we are just waiting 2 more minutes, 1 to 2 more minutes, so that we can have more people join us. Waiting for the other participants as well. If you can please mute your voice and camera, that would be great. Fantastic. Okay, thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Sophie Dralle, and I will be your host and moderator for the event, Managing Uncertainty During Times of Crisis. Today, as you will know by now, I hope, is that we will focus on personal and career development during the pandemic. I personally have been in this position, and so have my colleagues, and therefore we thought, wouldn't be a better way than to just give back and to bring all of what we've learned to everyone else, so that we also have a competitive advantage in an increasingly competitive environment when it comes to looking for new jobs. Quickly, some housekeeping before we start is that this event will be filmed. Recording will be shared after the event. Please keep your cameras and microphones off. Of course, panelists and myself will both have camera and microphone on. I, in the background, have been working with some amazing colleagues as well. Sabrina, who will be taking the questions. So if you have any questions, please add those in the chat. and my colleague Andrea, who will be managing the timekeeping with me silently in the background. Also for the logistics, we have Gunnar, Diane, and Helena from the DK-UK Association. That said, I want to introduce our fantastic panelists and speakers. If you can please put your camera on and your microphone on, I will make a quick introduction and then we can get started with today's event. First and foremost, we have with us Amin. Amin is the regional head and HR for Apex, which is a global private equity and advisory firm. He's previously been with a lot of great companies, for example, Barclays, and he's also the president of the Danish Royal Lifeguards Association in the UK. So a warm welcome to our panelist, Amy. We also have with us today Ingrid. Ingrid is an independent coach and trained in DISC with the John Maxwell team. And also she has started, founded schools, being principals of schools, run complex organization, and been involved in Danish politics, both in city council as well as national politics in Denmark. So a warm welcome to you as well, Ingrid. Finally, we have Johann, who we call our very own Bill Gates, a very cool guy, self-taught, and has started a really successful business called Individuals. Here they work with companies such as Vice Media, Mask, and Rockstad, where they focus on coaching, emerging leaders program, and doing HR support. He's also a general secretary for the largest global Danish business network in Denmark with 11,000 members. So I believe that these three experts will be able to give you a lot of good insights to our questions today. As I mentioned, if you can please close your microphones in the background. If you're not a panelist, and by now, please, panelists, can you turn on your cameras and your microphones, and we shall begin with the session today. Hi. So good to see you on this big screen. The first topic that we are going to look into today is the personal career and development. I myself have been in this position where you are looking to get a new job. You want to figure out, what can I learn? How can I be better? And how can this translate into a new job position? So Ingrid, why don't we start with you? How do you do that? How do you figure out what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And how can you stand apart? Are there any tools you can use? Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, I believe that the times that we grow the most is actually the difficult times. So we can feel really overwhelmed about what's going on in the world today, also what that means to our job situations. But I think that we need to learn to turn around these situations and consider putting focus on growing as an individual, because it will, when you make yourself strong personally, it will help you on a personal level, but it would definitely help you in on a professional level. And as a coach that has been certified by the John Maxwell team, I love to use assessments to help grow. And it's actually a not very complicated way of putting focus on who I am, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, how can I put an action plan together where I grow in specific areas. Because I know that in order to grow, I need to know myself. And in order to have influence with people around me, I need to make sure that I influence myself, or I choose people that could influence me. What kind of insight can people around me give me in order to come out stronger, personally and professionally?
That's a great point. So one of the words that come to my mind is also self-awareness is the first step, building that frame of mind where, and also having people that you can be safe with, that you feel you can trust, to who will support you and not judge you in your journey, and from there on you can have a strong foundation to grow. That's really great insight. Johann, do you have any thoughts on this question as well?
Yes, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so how do you think that, or maybe let me ask you another question. Everyone has a role to play as a part of a team, you know, knowing yourself and knowing where you can add value. How do you identify where you best fit in an organization?
I think it pretty much depends on where in your career you are. As a young professional, of course, I think you have to try different stuff to actually figure out what is your path. I see a lot of young professionals have a very clear idea of where to go after the university or because of their student job. But suddenly it happens that it's not the interest they thought they have, and then they have to change directions. And I often very much recommend that because it gives you an idea of the framework you like to work within, either because of you don't like it or because there's something that you like to do. And, you know, on the way, I of course recommend that even though you feel comfortable in the job, you don't change your job too often, just to learn, you know, more about the circle of work. Just because you're good at it, it also means that you can actually learn something from it again after a year or so. But after that, fair enough if you want to change your direction. But I fully understand it's also difficult to figure out what the right path are for you. Yeah, I don't know if that was a very clear answer. More like respect for it can be difficult to figure out. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think that was a good answer. I mean, do you have anything to add here?
Look, I think it's difficult. I think as and a lot of us will be Danish who are on this call, or at least Scandinavian. But I can only speak for the Danes because I'm a Dane myself, of course. But I think we are, especially when you come out of university and when you're fairly young in your career, you have all these like set paths, and there's all these things you want to do, and especially coming out of university and me thinking back upon my career. And I'm going to make this a hybrid answer to what you asked both Johann and what you asked Ingrid, but I think it's about understanding what are you good at and what do you really enjoy doing. Because all the people that I've worked with in the past, the people who constantly outperform are the people who really enjoy doing something that they're very good at. And I think about managing performance and managing people and managing yourselves. If you're able to figure that out, and that takes time, but if you're able to figure out where your peak compared where you don't peak, then we start coming into talking about like team dynamics and building teams and all these things to understand where do we have strengths, where do we have development areas, and all these other things. And that's where psychometrics can be a very good tool as well, another layer. But I think that's a really important thing, because just because you studied finance at Copenhagen Business School doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be really good at, you know, being a trader in the future potentially, right? You might end up becoming a coach or an occupational psychologist and like retraining, or you just become a program manager, whatever you end up doing. But that self-awareness, which I heard was a word that was used before, is super important. Because if you don't have that self-awareness and self-understanding of where you spike compared to other people, it's very difficult becoming successful.
Yeah, I really like what you say there. It's the word that keeps coming to my mind is agile mindset. And before we go to our mini Q&A, I just have one question, which is, what if you have this idea? This is where I want to go. This is where I see myself going. But you figure out you actually maybe have core skills or strengths that work better somewhere else, or you can perform even better, but it was not what you thought. How do you reconcile where you want to go versus where you're seeing your path taking you? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, look, I think it's very different to give a one-all answer to this, right? Because it's very different on who you're speaking to. I can only talk from myself. I have ended up in a completely different place that if you asked Amin, who was studying at Roskilde University, 15 years ago, Amin, where are you going to end up in 15 years, I would have no clue that I'll be sitting in London being the regional head of HR for a private equity firm. I didn't even know what private equity was 15 years ago, right? Even just 8 years ago, I didn't know what private equity was. So I think it's honestly about just going on board. Your career is a journey. And I think very few people at senior levels, if you ask them and said, you go back 10 years, you go back 15 years, you go back 20 years in your career, none of them would have said, I thought I would have landed up where I am. It is about enjoying what you do on a day-to-day basis. And it's about finding something you're very good at. And then it's about looking at those opportunities that come your way or that don't come your way, or those opportunities you create yourself. But it's all based on, what do I enjoy doing? What am I good at? If you don't answer those two questions, it's very difficult becoming successful.
Okay.
And I think can also
Sorry, Ingrid, we have to, due to time. I apologize.
No, don't worry.
But we can write it down and we will take it later, if not at the very end in the Q&A. Sabrina, I believe we have a question from one of the speakers. Can you please, one of the participants, can you please read it out loud?
Sure. So we have a question that asks, are there any top articles or book recommendations on personal and career development that any of the speakers would suggest?
Ingrid, why don't we go with you?
Well, I would definitely have two books that really has helped me. One is, and both of them are written by John Maxwell, who has written about more than 100 books on leadership. But one is called Developing the Leader Within You, which really challenge you on your level of leadership, leading yourself. And the other one is called Everybody Communicates, Few Connect. That communication is so important. You need to know who you are, how are you communicating, but you also need to know to see, how are people around me communicating? How do I connect with the people around me? Because it will build a new foundation for your future life if you know how to connect with people. So these two books, I can recommend.
Fantastic. So thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, everyone. We will jump to the next section of today. And for today, if there are any books and article recommendations, we can also send them after the event, further to what Ingrid has said. So moving on to presentation techniques. This is obviously something that we all have to think about when we are meeting potential new colleagues, HR, employers, but also people who can recommend us. So now that most things are happening online, how do you best present yourself, and what are the top tips to stand out? Johann, why don't we start with you, and then we can go to Amy.
Yes, and at the moment I'm trying to put in a book in the comment field. But so can you ask me the question again? I'm sorry, I'm just...
No, don't worry.
What am I actually reading at the moment, and then put it in? Sorry, yes?
Yes, how do you best present yourself online, and what are your top tips to standing out?
Be yourself. And it's a kind of a difficult way to approach it, but I really love when people are nervous and just accept that they are nervous. I like that people have no clue what they're doing online, and they somehow are looking into a wall, or instead of looking into the camera and so on. There's something charming about being authentic. And there's also some annoying about being too perfect and be too much of a sales guy. So I hope it helps the people that who are not comfortable about being online. And I think my colleague said to me that having meetings and presentations online pretty much tells you if you have the talent to do meetings. Because in physical meetings, you will often you can feel the atmosphere. Colleagues can help you if you're not comfortable and so on. Online, you just have to perform, if you can say so. So it is a tough environment to present, to perform in.
Thank you, Amy. Do you have any top tips here?
Look, I think we've all become experts over the last year. I think we've all seen what good looks like and what good doesn't look like. I would completely agree with you, Johann. Be authentic, be yourself. embrace working from home. Like in the first lockdown, nurseries were closed. I have a 3.5-year-old son. We just had another son like a couple of weeks ago. So it's a bit of a manic craziness, right? Being home with your kids and trying to run a professional life, let alone if you're interviewing, right? You're trying to show yourself from your best side. At least your colleagues and your friends at work, they know you. But like I was constantly Zoom bombed by my naked son, like running in because the weather was great in May and he was like out in the garden, and he would like constantly come and Zoom bomb the meetings. And embrace it, right? Embrace the quirkiness. Like I personally do not put these like virtual backgrounds on. I want you to see that I'm sitting in the spare bedroom with my wife's spin bike in the background and some books on the left side, because look, that's the world that I'm in right now. I will say this, like, just completely agree with Johann. Just like be yourself. Like the most awkward and weird thing is when I meet people for interviews is when they're sitting at home in like a suit with a tie on and everything, and I will literally log on in a shirt or maybe just a t-shirt that day. You guys are lucky that I've worn a shirt for you today. But what I will say is just like think about the audience, right? Who are you meeting? Like if you're doing an interview, just wear a nice shirt. Maybe put on a jacket if it's like maybe some Far East people that you're meeting with where there's some cultural reasons why you would dress more up. If you're meeting somebody from a tech company, maybe just wear a t-shirt. They wear t-shirts every single day, right? So I think it's about like reading your audience as well and knowing who you're going to be communicating to. The most powerful communicators are those who are flexible in their communication style. Those are the most powerful communicators. So be very mindful about what signals you're sending and what signals you're not sending, right? I'm pretty sure you, Sophie, have made an active decision that you haven't moved the olive oils and stuff behind you if you've left the tea towel because it looks really tidy. We actively make decisions in what we do. And your virtual background is just as important as your physical appearance.
Yes, thank you. I think that it's a great keyword to take away is read the audience and read the industry as well. One thought that came to me as you were talking is this thing I keep hearing in my professional life is that there's an increasing anxiety or panic attacks for people who have to present to large audiences online, such as this. So what do you do? Are there any practical tips to build your confidence and to prevent feeling anxious in these moments? Ingrid, do you have any advice here?
If you feel real uncomfortable being online or getting on video, record yourself again and again and again and again and get used to seeing yourself. It's just a really good advice because eventually you'll get very comfortable with that. Just get used to it and be relaxed about who you are. But do it again and again and again and again.
Practice is perfect.
If I can add just a quick comment to that, I also recommend that you actually ask for feedback, because I see a lot of people have thoughts about, okay, I'm not that good at it, or do I talk too much, or whatever happens when you are online. So just ask people, because that's what we need online to figure out, because it's difficult to feel comfortable, just as we are doing right now. I have no clue about what people actually think about me right now, so sometimes I have to ask for it. In this case, I would not, because I don't want to hear the answers. But
fantastic. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and that leads back to the question. Reach out for help. Reach out for people who want to mentor you, and then you have the foundation from there to grow if you also find people who you can trust. I think I will ask you one more question and then we will go to audience. I think a lot of this is also about standing out compared to other people. We've talked about some things that people can do themselves, but when it comes to this massive competition, I guess, that we are seeing now when it comes to everybody being online, everybody, being the next fit for the company, and also the jobs, maybe there aren't as many as there were before. How do you stand out? How do you deal with those nerves? And what are some key tips you can do without seeming too pushy in your communication with other people? Eamon, I think maybe this is one for you.
Look, I think it's really difficult at the moment, right? I think there's some industries who are doing incredibly well, and there's some industries who are at their knees. Travel industry being one of them, and like they're just like normal, like consumer, like restaurant business, shops, etc. How do you stand out? I guess it comes back to the answer of like, what do you want to do, right? Who do you want to be? How do you want to look like? In the same way that when we go out with our friends and we want to let loose and go out clubbing, wear like a specific suit, we have a specific mindset. Tonight's going to be a stupid, silly night. I'm going to get really drunk and I'm going to go have a dirty kebab and like throw up in the cab. Versus, going out for a professional dinner with some colleagues and like, et cetera, et cetera. The worst people who I see online and I get contacted with are the people who simply just don't read like the industry or their audience, and the people who take a blank hole approach. For example, I might get an unsolicited email from some person, but sometimes that person has literally sent an email to 40 people in my organization. Like, is that the way to be noticed? Or is everybody just going to think you might be slightly annoying that you spam 40 people in the organization? Or do you want to potentially target yourself? Like, is there a way in? Do you know somebody there? Could you get introduced? Like, how do you get in front of the people in the right way? Be tactful. Like, political and tactfulness is super important to be able to be noticed the right way. Think about how you use the social platforms like LinkedIn. What is LinkedIn? LinkedIn for me is a like social media for work, right? Yes. I can sometimes be surprised about how I see people use LinkedIn. That doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. That just means that that's not the way I would prefer to use LinkedIn. I prefer to be much more passive on LinkedIn. I used to link in with people who have a personal, not just a personal, but also work relationship with.
Yes.
So it's about just like reading the audience, reading the world that you're a part of, the world you want to be a part, and try to be a little bit more tactful instead of just like going out guns blazing. In the same way you wouldn't stand in front of a building with a microphone and stand there and yell and say, I want a job. That's probably not going to get you a job, right?
Yes.
But maybe cornering the person at the coffee bar who you want to meet and getting in a conversation with him might then lead you to having a conversation with somebody else.
Yes. So just before we go to the mini Q&A, thank you so much.
Sophie, can I add a quick comment to that?
Well, let's keep it for now because we will actually go into this topic a lot in a moment. We will be focusing on networking online. I think just wrapping up this section and segment is be personable. State why are you reaching out? What is your intention and who do you have in common? Who recommended you to reach out or get them to recommend you so that you have that personal relationship, that there is a purpose and a meaning to the end. Sabrina, can we just have one question? It would be great if you can read the question here from the audience. That would be amazing.
Fantastic. So yes, we have a question from Oliver. We have asked him to clarify a bit more, but what we've got so far, maybe the speakers can help with an answer. He's asked, if you have less exposure to your peers in London, how do you assess what you're good at comparatively? So the reference, for example, the reference frame for skill levels seem drastically different in different industries. So for example, financial services and consulting, people's skill levels seem different between Copenhagen and London.
Yes, I will refer this to Eamon, and due to time, we will just, if we can keep it short, we can always dive into at the end. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Sabrina. I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. But look, different cultures and different locations will have different skill sets, and there will be different social norms that play. And I think you need to be mindful of that. Like, I've worked a lot with people from India, and there's an Indian culture and there's an Indian skill set, which means that people think differently, they act differently. And you need to be mindful about that when maneuvering that like political field. I think it's about using your strengths compared to your peers. How you do that, I'm not really sure, because I honestly, Sophia, don't really 100% understand the question. I don't feel if you hang out Ingela did.
I think we have some further clarification, Sabrina, and then we have to move on to the next segment.
So Oliver's clarified and said his impression is that the skill level in London is very, very high, probably because a lot more competition, and it seems a lot more of a cutthroat culture than in Copenhagen. And I imagine that's probably down to the sheer amounts of competition. So maybe, Eamon, you can that helps with coming up with an answer.
Look, it is true. I hate sporting analogies, but sometimes sporting analogies are very good. And it is literally like, especially when you're looking at consulting and financial services, where London is one of the hubs of the world, it is a bit like going from, playing in the Danish Superliga to playing like the Premier League. Like it's just going to be the tempo is just going to be much, much higher and faster. And what that means is because there's a different work culture over here. People don't work 37.5 hours a week in London. People work, like I'm in HR and I work minimum 50 hours a week, if not 60, 70 hours a week. Anybody sitting in Denmark doing an HR role there would think that I'm absolutely bananas for that. But it's just a different culture environment. And what that means, faster competition, international environment, people come to London to work in financial services. So it means the best of the best will try to like migrate here to work, versus Denmark isn't known for being a financial services hub.
Yes. Thank you, Eamon. This was really good. And also, Oliver, we can discuss this later, but you can always join the Young Professionals, where we are a bunch of Danes in the UK who've done this. So feel free to reach out to us after this event. Moving on to the third out of 4 segments, we'll be looking at networking online. And because we left with you, Johann, I'm going to pose you a question, and you can also dive into what you had in mind. But if you can look at the online networking do's and don'ts, and how do you best communicate with people online, and build your network as well. Johann, over to you.
I first of all saw a new way of building your network in spring last year, of course, because people needed a beer together Friday afternoon and drinks Saturday and so on. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of it, sitting online and building your network. To me, it's a little bit more like we are playing something that we don't really want to do because we meet at bars, and now we're trying to do it halfway. But the other way around, I see that people have more time to do these check-ins. So if you remember that most people actually want to help you if you ask for something specific. So for instance, let's say write to people at LinkedIn if you have any specific requests. I often see if you are a nice guy and approach in a respectful way, people are open to either text you back with a recommendation or either have 10 minutes or 20 minutes of a call with you. So a young professional or a senior professional, if you allow yourself to reach out to help, I think it's a nice way to build your network right now, also just in another way than sitting on a bar.
Yeah, very good. Ingrid, do you have anything you'd like to add here?
No, I just fully agree with asking great questions. It's just a very good way of getting to communicate with people that you don't really know. Mm-hmm. And then don't be afraid to add value, to share the experiences that you have in order to connect with people. And then make sure that you choose several different kind of networks. So professional networks are good, but also private, because networking privately can have such an impact on your professional life. So I myself, as a family, we're part of a church, which is a great way to connect because there's so many different types of people, or the local kayak club club where we go kayaking. So I'm actually quite aware of what kind of networks do I connect to, but I always try to offer my expertise, or even just, can I help? Because it's a great way of connecting.
Yes, I completely agree. And this reminds me of a very practical message that I have been writing down, and I was advised to use this. And it sums exactly of what you say, Ingel, which is basically, hi, this is who I am. This is what I do. I would love to know more about what you're doing in your industry. Can we have a coffee, or do you have 10 minutes of your time? And it also summarizes what Johann said. And there you go. You have a genuine message, and you're also sharing what value you bring to the table. And you can then explore more advice from other people. I guess, do any of you have any burning questions or comments here that you would like to share when it comes to online networking?
Yeah.
And any do's and don'ts, any funny stories, or anything that you should definitely not do?
No, it's more like, don't take it personally when people don't have the time for you. It might not be about you, but just about their calendar. So just keep going after that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially in London. It is cutthroat. It is a numbers game. The quicker you can get connected, or you can find someone who can introduce you, don't take it personally. It is just what it is. It's a massive city. Don't be discouraged either, because if you keep going, you will meet the right people. Don't give up. Cool. Before we move to the final segment of today, Sabrina, do we have any questions from the audience?
Sure. So the question we have here is that, are there any tips for shy or introverted people when it comes to networking? Obviously, not all of us are bright, bubbly people that can just go out and speak to anyone.
Thank you. Great question.
Share what you're good at, share your expertise, and don't be afraid of sharing that. And then eventually it will turn over to something else. It will lead into a conversation that could go beyond that. But you know what you're good at, and share that. Quite simple, actually.
I like what you say. Be open-minded, because you never know what will happen. This person might not be able to help you, but you never know if they can introduce you or what can happen later down the line. So be open-minded. Johann, over to you.
Yeah, I just think you can split it up in two. Of course, if it's for the first time you're trying to approach people or having online meetings, of course it's difficult. That's just how it is for all people. So you have to repeat it. And then there's the other way of thinking about it, is that just as I do, if I feel nervous during a presentation, I just tell people, hey, I'm nervous. And that could be the case here as well. Joining in, just be honest. Hey, I'm a little bit shy. I'm a little bit introvert. I hope it's okay. But that will actually make me feel very comfortable in the meeting that you just open up. And hopefully it could be a way to approach the meeting just by telling how you feel. I think most will take very positive, approach to that.
Okay, actually, I have one question, and then we move on to the industry overview. But particularly in London, again, being more cutthroat, you will meet people, and I'm just being honest, like 90% of people are fantastic. And then you will meet the odd one out that will not respond well to and be very empathetic. How do you brush that off your shoulders and, move on from that? Amy, do you have any advice here?
Look, there's going to be jerks everywhere you go. You're going to meet them in the supermarket. You're going to meet them at the checkout counter at the pharmacy, and you're going to meet them in work situations. I think the important thing is to not react. Sometimes people just want a reaction. Sometimes they've had a bad day. Look, not everybody is super uber professional 24/7. You might have caught them in a bad day. They might actually not normally be like this, or they are normally just a jerk. And hey ho, now you know not to work for those people anymore, right?
Yes.
But London is super fast paced, and London does sometimes show some of the nastier sides of people because it is so fast paced, because people are really busy, because there's a lot of pressures. So I would just say, don't take it personal, learn from it and move on. If you, in the same way that if somebody bumps you into you on the street and you walk into them, you shouldn't go and like be grumpy the whole day because somebody bumped into your street. It's like brush it off your shoulder. All right, apologies, and move on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We will go to the last segment of today, which is a general industry overview. The first thing I'd like to explore, keeping in line with you, Amin, and then we can go to the other panelists. How have you seen the market change when it comes to recruitment over the past year? Any insights you can give here on what to look out for?
Look, I can only talk about my own industry. When the pandemic started around this time last year, we were all freaking out. The markets were crashing. And I don't think anybody thought that we're gonna be here a year after. So what we initially said was, all right, we're not gonna recruit. We're just gonna put a pause on for a couple of months. We're gonna see how we go. This virus will and then that didn't happen, right? So I think we then looked at ourselves and said, all right, this is going to take a long time, right? We need to embrace Zoom. We need to embrace virtual interviews. We've hired a ton of people virtually. We've hired and onboarded people who we've never seen face to face. I promise you, just a year ago, I would never have thought that would be possible for us to do that. But we have, because we've just run with the tides and we've embraced it. It's super difficult at the moment, and it still is. And I think everybody, especially now, wants to get back to normal. I think the industry as a whole is going to see a big change, especially the old school financial services sector that I'm a part of. We're slight dinosaurs. The tech giants are leading the way when it comes to this. And you've seen companies like Spotify go out and say, we're just going to embrace you. We're going to look for talent everywhere in the world. We're not going to ever think about, where are you based? And we're going to go for the talent pool in that location. We're going to go for the global talent pool. So there's going to be some really positive things that come out of this. And the world that I'm a part of, the private equity industry and subsectors of the financial services industry, we're also going to need to embrace some of this about the whole flexible working and what that looks like and what the future looks like. But it is super interesting. I think this is a very interesting time to be a part of, the working culture, because everything is going to drastically change super fast paced because you're not on board. Yes. And if you're not going to give your employees or your future hires the flexibility and some of the other things, there's competitors out there that will, right? Yes. And I think money is no longer the major driving factor in the talent pool these days. It just isn't.
That's a very good point, actually, that it's not just from the view of the employer, but it's also from the employee. There's more to negotiate for today than there was a year ago when it comes to, like you say, flexibility of where we work and so on. Moving on to the next question, and also playing on what you said, Amin, Johann, over to you, and then one for Ingrid later. What are the industries that you are seeing that are actively recruiting more now than before? And of course, we already touched a little bit upon the suffering industries, but are there any changes here that you're seeing people should explore and go more into?
Yeah, of course, it's always interesting to look into businesses who are kind of in a transition digitally. So that means that, of course, in many industries, they are already, trying to be more digital and look into all that kind of both to approach their clients, but also just to change the way of thinking their industry. But of course, there will be a lot of hirings around that. We work with a commercial bureau in Copenhagen who just opened an office in Canada as well. And we see they are hiring a lot of people, but they are hiring because of their clients are looking for more support, which is very, very interesting. Of course, you can always dig deeper into become a lawyer. They always have something to do, no matter what, we go up and down. But just to come back to what you also said, Sophie, looking for a job today, even though you're moving from Copenhagen or Denmark to London, or in a way in today's market where it can be more difficult because of the time we are in, you have to look at it as a numbers game. So if you have approached 10 people, it's not a good enough number. You have to approach 100 people. You have to not 40 people in the same company, but 100 different companies. And if that's not enough, 200 companies. But in many ways, I see young professionals or people give up after 10 or 20s because it feels like a lot of approaches and a lot of reaching out. But it is a numbers game, and for every 100, I think there will be one conversation ready for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. That was great insight. Ingrid, you mentioned earlier on that it's all about turning around your situation, turning it into something positive. So what are some of the pros versus the cons here? What are some of the good things that you're seeing in that people can take away here and really build as a strength in the industry?
Well, I think as one that is applying for a job, make sure that you don't feed your fears, feed your faith that there is a world out there that needs your abilities, your who you are, and then because what happens when you feed your faith in the future, it can actually be felt. Growth can be seen and it can be heard. So you gotta make sure that you are strong when you go out there and find a job or ask for opportunities. And you can actually discipline yourself. You can teach your brain to not feed your fears, but see and believe that there is a space for you in the world today. And life is not as complicated as we try to do it. Life is actually quite simple. And if we start looking at life like that, okay, I am who I am, this is what I can offer. I know there's people out there that need my input in the world today. Then you can relax a bit better, and people will sense that, they will feel that.
Yes, I think that's a very, very good point. And I think there are two thoughts that come to me when we say this, when you talk about these things. I guess it's also about, having the right foundation, but also being confident and standing out. So how do you take that confidence and how do you use it in a constructive way without coming off as arrogant or pushy or anything like this? If you have this newfound confidence and you are in a position of strength, how do you utilize it? Let's say in job negotiation or meeting recruiters and so on.
Well, first I would say have somebody in your life, have a mentor, have a coach in your life that can help you stabilize the growth in your life, so that you know who you are is actually, it's great, it's good. Because then when you're in a situation where you're negotiating, you would know your boundaries, you would know your values, and you will offer your expertise and say, this is what I can offer. Can you use it? If you can't, fine, I will look for another job. So I believe it's about having that balance in your life where this is where I want to go, this is what I'm going to work with, and I'm not prepared to give that up just in order to get a job that I'm being paid for.
That's a very, very good point. Thank you, Ingrid. We just have I have one final question here to Johann, and then we will go to the Q&A. Johann, you mentioned something about industries going digital. How do you manage this? If we can just dive into this a little bit more. Let's say you are in the events industry, which has, of course, suffered a lot. What are ways that you can take those skills, be it that or tourism or something else, that you can use them in other industries, or what are some channels that you can bring that value in and use that as an advantage?
First of all, I'm very sorry about all the people who are working in the service industries. It's difficult times. I fully understand that, but being in Dublin, for instance, for a couple of years ago, I saw how the tech business are growing over there, and going into customer support will be a big thing from now on and in the future. And so bringing this service skills you have from hotel industry, restaurant industry, and putting it into customer support could be one of the very next steps if you're going to look for a job. And there will be a lot of customer support jobs in London or in Stockholm and Copenhagen as well. But that was just to be very concrete in the way you can change over. And to me, helping people into that industry with another background, it's pretty much about telling them that you can be the one who helps their clients. And how you can do that is because you're used to help clients from whatever you're coming from, but let's say hotel industry. And then there's, of course, all the companies who has been thinking about going more digital in the way they approach either their clients or the way they work internally. And now it's time for them just to adjust and adapt a lot faster. And it can be difficult, but I see a lot of people have to do that today. And I just have to say that young professionals today can be a good support helping companies adjust.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So mindful of time, we have 12 minutes left of today's session. I think we might have some questions from the audience. Sabrina, let's take a couple here. If you have maybe one you would like to start with, let's begin there.
Fantastic. So one question we have is, what are some of the regional differences between recruitment now in the UK and in Denmark?
Thank you. Amin, why don't we begin with you?
Sure. I can only talk within the industry of financial services, but here they use recruiters a lot. I want to start by saying recruitment is a volume-based game, right? So just because you don't get picked for your dream interview, you might never have been seen. So the regional differences is, and I think Johann can talk a little bit more about Copenhagen, because I haven't really worked in Copenhagen for the last 10, 11 years. But London is recruiters. So building a good relationship, understanding who are the 3, 4, 5, 6 best headhunters in this field that I want to go into, understanding who they are, but also understanding, like, do they use headhunters or actually do they use internal? Some of the big tech giants, you have internal recruitment firms and they have like 10, 15, 20 people that sit there and scour LinkedIn. So that's the first thing, understanding like what firm, what industry, and do they primarily use headhunters or do you have internal recruiters? But London is primarily internal headhunters. The second thing I want to say is make sure you're on LinkedIn and make sure you are building a network. London doesn't have the beautiful Danish word called jantelov, which for all the English people out there or the non-Danes, it more or less means don't think you're better than the next door neighbor. In London, in the US, you are allowed to brag a bit. You're about to show off your skills. Don't be a jerk again. But you are definitely allowed to, more than back home in Denmark, to show what you're worth and show what you're very good at. So you can definitely talk about your skills, where you're good at, where you excel, etc. Those are the two big differences, I think, when it comes to recruitment. I don't know, Johann, how is it back home in Denmark?
It's like playing in the Super League up against the Premier League. There's just fewer players here in Denmark, and we have to put 11 players at the field every time, or 22. So the point is that it's a kindergarten in Copenhagen up against London. And if we have a job position ready for on the market, I can find, let's say, 10 or 100 good people for it. Of course, if you are at London market, there will be 200 great people for the job. So it's very logical math. And that's why it's more difficult, but that's also why we see a lot of young professionals actually would like to test themselves going to the London market. But I don't want to hear them cry about not finding a job, because of course you're up against the market who are not grown up necessarily in a Danish comfort welfare state system where there's a job for everyone. You are actually up against a market where people has been suffering or has been poor, has been whatever kind of fighting to the way they want to go to their career. So that's a perspective I try to share with the young professionals in Denmark moving to London or China or wherever they go.
Absolutely. Competition is fierce, but nothing is impossible. So you should definitely not give up. Just a quick follow-up question here. How do you make your CV or LinkedIn stand out from the crowd? I will leave this to Eamon and maybe Ingrid after.
Look, the only thing I will say is make sure your CV is tight. And what I mean by tight is the amount of CVs that I get where they're not being consistent. They're not being consistent in how they show dates. There might be typo errors. There might be a mix of, do you use American English, do you use British English? There might not be the same formatting. There might be different colors. Like, make sure that CV is spotless. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I would like to say is, what are you trying to do? Like, what are you trying to sell to? There's so many CVs that I see, and I call it a gross CV and I call it a net CV, right? So you have your gross CV where you have everything on it you've done. And then depending on what role you're applying for, you're going to strip out some of these things that are irrelevant, and you're going to just highlight those things that are relevant. Like anything else, if you talk too much, there's going to be too much noise. And I'm one of those people that talk a lot, but the CV needs to be able to just show those 5, 6, 7 key things. If somebody's been working for 5, 6 years, I don't want to see a 4-page CV. That's too long. Like 2 pages max. Highlight those key things and make sure that it's really, really strong. What that CV is trying to do, and I think this is the one key thing that I tell people, is that CV is just going to sell you. The purpose of the CV is to get you a job interview and nothing else, right? So that CV is not about to elaborate on the 15 years of your career achievement. It's simply just to get you in front of that person at the interview, and then you can elaborate. And the LinkedIn profile, I would say, needs to be an even more condensed version of your CV. That LinkedIn profile needs to be able to tell some of people, here is somebody who's interesting. There's some buzzwords, some keywords, some things there that I want to explore this person further. Think about how you represent yourself. The amount of bad LinkedIn pictures as well. Make sure you have a LinkedIn picture, but give your friend who's a amateur professional photographer 2 beers and ask him to take a really nice picture of you when the weather's nice, and then get into Photoshop it and then put it on your LinkedIn profile instead. Just like think about how you present yourself in the nicest way possible.
Thank you, Eamon. We will have a final question from the audience, and I will direct this to you, Ingrid. Sabrina, can you please ask the question?
Sure. So if you've left your job or you have a gap in your CV, what are the recommendations for handling the time in between and moving on? How do you tell a positive story?
Ingrid, over to you. Thank you, Sabrina.
I would first of all make sure that I surround myself with people that inspire me. And when I say that, obviously I don't mean it physically right now, but there will be a gap and I will start to wonder if the world needs me. Because I will be in between, and you really need to inspire yourself. Listen to great books, listen to great speakers, but be very intentional with what you listen to, and then take that as a growth opportunity. I've said it before, and I'm going to continue to say it. Grow, but do it intentionally, and figure out where you want to go, because as you do that, it actually brings joy into your life. And in order to apply for a new job, people need to feel that you are not desperate, that you are actually kind of on top of life. You have energy, you want to go somewhere. So take care of yourself and make sure that you surround yourself with people that can encourage you and inspire you.
Yes. Thank you, Ingrid.
The only thing I would, Sophie, just quickly add to what Ingrid says is make sure that they have the same point of reference, right? So the people who are giving you advice, it's super important they understand that industry you're in. I wouldn't be able to give great advice for the hotel industry, for example, because I've got no experience. So make sure there's people who are giving you actual advice about how to approach things, that there are people who know what they're talking about, so you have the same frame of reference.
Great point. Any final comment, Johann, and then we will have to wrap up.
Yes, I have a recruitment in 3 minutes going on.
Fantastic.
I think I just want to mention that a little bit up against what Ingrid said once, that the life can be very simple. I think the career can be very complex. in a way that you have to learn to deal with that, and you have to accept that some things you can do something about and others you can't. But it's kind of the way we all have to deal with an ambitious career if you want that. And then, of course, you have to adapt and adjust on the way. So I just feel that a lot of young professionals think that they from the very beginning can control everything, and that's not the truth. You have no chance. It's too complex. So you just have to kind of learn to live in the complexity.
Yes. Well, that was fantastic. On those final words, really, really great. I want to wrap up today's session. Thank you so much to Johann, Ingel, and Eamon for all of your insight. It's been wonderful. To summarize, we've gone over the importance of having self-awareness, being able to be agile in your mindset in terms of how you adapt and adopt different opportunities and different turns that life can give you. Have a strong foundation, surround yourself virtually or legally on a one-person walk in London at least, with people who bring you up, and make sure to seek out positive influence for being in a strong mind, having a strong mindset and being ready for the competition, and take it on the chin, dust yourself off and move on, and don't take it personal. So that you can be on top of the game and win in the numbers game, but also in the job game. This has been really, really wonderful. Thank you for all your insights. I hope that all of our participants have some great takeaways that they can enjoy from here. Thank you to my amazing colleagues, Sabrina and Andrea, as well as Gunnar, Diane, and Helena. We will send you the recording on email afterwards, where we will also have our LinkedIn, both for our team and for panelists. If you're lucky, you can maybe reach us or them. We at least from the young professionals are here to help you and guide you. So you can either join as a member of the young professionals and get connected with Danes in the UK. Also, if you're not a Danish person, feel free to reach out. We have a lot of events coming up, such as we had with this one. On March, we have International Women's Day on the 8th of March, as well as an event in July with the annual summer reception. And in December, we have our annual Christmas lunch. There will be more events coming up throughout the year, so please make sure to look on the website. Links will be sent in the email, so we will navigate together with the panelists for any practical top tips that you can take away and you can implement in your life afterwards. Thank you so much for today. On the dot, we will let you go. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a fantastic evening wherever you are. Bye.
Bye.